He stared at the old toolbox one last time, fingers trembling, heart heavier than the rusted steel beneath his hands. Every scratch on the metal, every dent, every oil stain told a story, years of labor, building dreams that never quite came true. And now, it had come to this. James Miller, once a proud carpenter, now a struggling single father of two, was about to sell the only thing he had left that made him feel like he still had control over his life. His tools weren't just objects, they were memories of better days, of hope, of providing. But now, they were his last chance to put food on the table. It hadn't always been like this. Just 3 years ago, James had a steady job with a small construction company. He'd married his high school sweetheart, had 2 beautiful kids, Lily and Max, and lived in a modest house in a quiet town. Life was never extravagant, but it was good. Then, cancer came and tore through his world like a storm through a fragile barn. His wife, Emily, was diagnosed at 33. She fought hard, smiling through the pain, assuring James it would be okay, even as she faded before his eyes. 6 months later, she was gone, and James was left holding their world together with nothing but grit and love. The grief was merciless. He tried to go back to work, but between the funeral, the bills, the emotional wreckage, and 2 children who didn't understand why mommy wasn't coming back, everything collapsed. The company couldn't keep him on. He tried odd jobs, anything he could find, but there were more mouths to feed than there were hours in the day. His savings vanished, then the credit cards maxed out. The fridge became empty more often than not. He'd learned how to survive on toast and water so the kids could eat the few cans left in the cupboard. One cold Tuesday morning, with winter scratching at the windows and Max coughing in the next room, James made a decision. He pulled out his old red toolbox, the one his dad gave him when he was 18, and walked down to the pawn shop 3 blocks over. The owner, a weary man named Don, looked at him with quiet understanding. "You sure about this?" he asked, almost hesitant to name a price. James nodded. "It's for my kids." Don gave him a couple $100. It wasn't much, but enough for groceries, medicine for Max, and maybe a few days of breathing room. That night, James cooked a proper meal for the first time in weeks, spaghetti with actual sauce, garlic bread, and even a cheap little dessert for the kids. Lily smiled, Max laughed. For a moment, it felt like things might be okay. But relief was short-lived. The next morning, Max's fever spiked. James rushed him to the local clinic, praying they'd still treat him despite their outstanding bill. The nurse looked at the file, frowned, but waved them through. Hours later, they found out it was pneumonia. The doctor gave James the look he'd grown to hate, pity masked his professionalism. "If he hadn't come in today, it might have been too late," the doctor said gently. James nodded, but his heart cracked a little more. He couldn't keep doing this. He was barely hanging on, and the kids needed more than what he could give. Back home, after putting Max to bed, James sat alone on the sofa, staring at his calloused hands. Hands that used to build homes, fix furniture, shape wood into beauty. Now, they just trembled with shame. He whispered a broken prayer, not even sure who he was praying to. "I don't know what to do anymore. Just help me, please." The next day, the miracle began. It didn't arrive with trumpets or flashing lights. It started with a knock on the door. When James opened it, he found a woman holding a clipboard. "Hi, are you James Miller?" she asked. He nodded cautiously. "I'm Amanda. I'm with Community Hands. We're a local nonprofit that helps families get back on their feet. Someone submitted your name. We'd like to help." James blinked, confused. "I didn't." "Who?" She smiled gently. "Anonymous submission. But we looked into it. You used to be a carpenter, right?" He nodded slowly. "Well, we're running a housing project. We need skilled hands. It's not full-time yet, but it pays, and we cover transportation, lunch, and there's a childcare option during work hours. Interested?" James didn't know whether to cry or fall to his knees. He just managed a choked, "Yes. Yes, absolutely." That week, James started working again. It wasn't glamorous, and it was tough waking up before dawn, but it felt good to sweat with purpose. He hammered nails, sanded floors, installed cabinets, his hands remembered. His heart began to thaw. The staff at Community Hands treated him with dignity, and the other workers, each with stories of their own, became a second family. Word spread. Within 2 months, James was offered a full-time position, not just building homes, but mentoring young trainees. His natural teaching ability and calm demeanor made him a favorite. He even got to visit a local high school to talk to students about vocational work, which reignited something in him he'd thought he'd lost, hope. One morning, while packing lunches for Lily and Max, James opened a small envelope that had arrived in the mail. Inside was a card that read, "You don't know me, but I knew Emily. She once sat with me during chemo, held my hand when I was scared. I never forgot her kindness. When I heard what you were going through, I had to help. I knew she'd want that." Tears slipped down James's cheeks as he folded the card back into the envelope. He never found out who sent it, but in that moment, it didn't matter. It was a reminder that kindness, like grief, moves in circles. Sometimes what you give returns to you when you need it most. Today, James still works with community hands. He rebuilt his workshop, slowly buying back tools with every paycheck. Each one felt like reclaiming a part of himself. He's not rich, but the fridge stays full. Max's laughter fills the house, and Lily's drawings decorate the fridge. They talk about Mom often, and James makes sure her memory feels like light, not loss. And every time he picks up a hammer, James remembers that moment he almost gave up. When he traded metal for meals, hope for survival. And how life, against all odds, answered his whispered prayer with a miracle. Because sometimes, when the toolbox is empty and the soul is worn, that's exactly when the universe begins to build something new.